The city of Baghdad was actually founded in 750, and then it was, pretty much world history teachers know, 1258 it was wiped out by the Mongols. But in that period between there, one of the things that happened in 751 that's important is the Battle of Talas. And that battle was against China, and it opened the eastern expansion towards China. And one of the things that the Muslim scholars encountered at that battle, they had some prisoners of war, and they found out that they could make this stuff called paper. And that revolutionized scholarship, because papers moved then into Baghdad, and the paper mills with the pounding. Baghdad always had this constant pounding with the paper mills. The paper moved to Mecca by 707. It actually was, they have found graves with paper in them now in China as early as 300 BCE. They thought it was founded around 300 CE, but now they found it BCE. Little tiny strips of paper that have actually survived in graves. Gets to Spain in 950 and Constantinople in 1100, and it shows up in England in 1309. So you can see it kind of moving west towards Europe. And this is important because it makes manuscripts easier to carry, easier to write. They used to use vellum and skins of animals and papyrus, which became very brittle and broke. Even the skins, if they weren't oiled, became brittle and broke. So this was a pretty big breakthrough. As I said, in 830, Baitul Hikmah, the House of Wisdom, was found in Baghdad. And so then Baghdad becomes, as I said, the world, really sort of the center of world trade, because Europe's kind of backward at that point, and Baghdad's right along the Silk Road, center of high court culture and center of scholarship. One of the things that's kind of fun, I'll bring it tomorrow, a 3-ring notebook that Susan Douglas and I wrote together as a combination project between Darul Islam and the Council on Islamic Education. And it's a 3-ring notebook for teachers. And one of the things that I found that I put in that was a list of trade items. There was a guy by the name of Abu Uthman bin Bar, and in the 9th century he made a list of what was coming through Baghdad. And it was really interesting. My students really enjoyed this because I had a little class activity tied into it. But from India, they were getting tigers, panthers, rubies, ebony, coconuts. From China, and of course, what I'm hoping the students catch is the higher culture in China, because China was bringing in silk, porcelain, paper, peacocks, cinnamon, drugs, utensils of gold and silver, engineers, agronomists, and marble workers. And you're literally going to have to remind your students that humans were trade items on the Silk Road. They kind of forget that. So marble workers, musicians, dancers are being sold along this area. But I could go on with this list, but I won't. But there's a lot of really interesting things like giraffes, zither players coming through Baghdad by the 9th century. One of the things I want to talk about quickly was court culture. Haroon Rashid was the, is that written on any of your slides? I don't know if you have his name on any of your slides. But one of the most important rulers of Baghdad was Haroon. It's spelled al-Rashid, but it's pronounced al-Rashid. So Haroon al-Rashid became the ruler of Baghdad and ended up striking a friendship with Charlemagne. So one of the things that happens with Charlemagne is one of the things that you have to keep in mind with your students too is that there's a real competition that's going to develop between Eastern Orthodox Christianity and Roman Catholicism. And this is already developing early in the Christian world, this sort of clash between these two, because it's a fight for power, basically, is what it is. And one of the things that happens is Haroon al-Rashid ends up allying with Charlemagne, a Christian ruler, and it makes an alliance to protect each other if Byzantine attacks either of them. So you're going to see, even during the Crusades, you're going to see Christians aligning with Muslims against other Christians. You're going to see Muslims approaching Christians and saying, let's have an alliance against these Muslims. So there is the threat of a Byzantine attack. So the strong link between these two, Haroon al-Rashid and Charlemagne, becomes pretty important. They start exchanging gifts. And one of the most famous ones, I think, that was given was a set of figures that was for a game that was new to Europe. It hadn't been seen in Europe, but it actually developed in India and then went into Persia and then into Iraq. And it's a game of military strategy with a little board and these little figures that look like horses and knights and a king and a queen. And when you take the other person's king, you grab it and you say, Sheikh-mat. So, of course, that's your checkmate. That's your checkmate in your chess game. So that's one of the things that was given to Charlemagne. So chess actually entered Europe through Charlemagne as a gift from Haroon al-Rashid of Baghdad. In 799, Haroon al-Rashid also gave a mechanical clock to Charlemagne, and the clock, every hour on the hour, a door would open and a little soldier would come out. And so the Europeans thought that that was magic, so they wanted to get rid of that. So they were not happy with that present at all. That was something that they thought, this is magic, get it out of here. So they got that one out of Charlemagne's castle quickly, but they liked the other stuff. And even an elephant, they gave him an elephant. But Baghdad is a center of scholarship. As I said, the House of Wisdom was built there to gather, to sort of summarize all the knowledge into one place. And when we talk about Islamic scholarship, by the way, I think that's a term that we really need to define, because I use it to refer to scholarship that is being done under Islamic patronage. So you may have somebody like Haroon al-Rashid who's in Baghdad who's bringing Jews and Christians in. But it's under Islamic patronage that the Jews, even the Hindus, there's Hindus coming in, there's Buddhists coming in from China. These people are working underneath Islamic patronage. So a lot of times you're going to get this mixture of Jews, Christians, and Muslims in particular working in these Islamic courts. And then in a little while we'll be looking at the European side of it, and people like King Roger of Sicily, who's got a Christian court that's supporting Islamic scholars as well. So there's a whole lot of interchange going on that people usually aren't quite aware of. But I wanted to mention a person by the name of Hunayn ibn Ishaq, because I don't have his name here. He became the first librarian at the House of Wisdom. Ibn Ishaq, 9th century Christian. He was a Nestorian Christian. So there was a lot of Christian scholarship coming into the beginning because of this. There also developed a competition amongst the Muslim rulers to have royal patronage of scholarship. That became a step to status, was to have the greatest scholars in your court. So they would lure people away, by saying, in fact, one of the things they finally did was they said, for every book that you translate, we'll weigh it and we'll give you gold equal in weight to the manuscript that you just translated. So if it's translated from Greek or Syriac or Latin or whatever, they would get its weight in gold. There's a person by the name of Munir-ud-Din Ahmed who wrote a book called Muslim Education and the Scholar's Social Status up to the 5th Muslim era. It's called The History of Baghdad. And I liked his quote over here. It seemed as if all the world, from the caliph down to the humblest of citizens, suddenly became students. In quest of knowledge, men traveled over 3 continents and returned home like bees, laden with honey, to impart the precious stores which they had accumulated to crowds of eager disciples. One of the things that would happen is they would hear that somebody's coming in with manuscripts from Constantinople, from Europe, from Rome, from Africa, from Persia, from India, and they would literally have these parades and these huge ceremonies as the people came into the gate to Baghdad, because they were coming with knowledge. And so they just had these huge celebrations of these people who took a dangerous trip. It's not easy. So if you're going to Central Asia to get a manuscript and you come back in 3 years, it's a pretty big deal. So they had some pretty elaborate ceremonies.